Welcome to Made for Another World podcast with Aaron Alvarado and me, Jacob Simmons. Each week, we have distinct and stately conversations regarding Christian books, stories, songs, and sermons with the hopes that we'll walk away a little homesick for the world that is to come. But this is episode 14, and tonight we have with us Wilson Marsh. Wilson serves as the lead pastor of First Baptist Dawson here in Dawson, Texas. And Wilson is married to Kayla, and together they have 4 kids, Walker, Liam, Olivia, and John. Wilson, thanks for joining us, man.
Thank you both. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
That's great.
So we mainly pull snippets of truth from solid books and authors, and we've been expanding a bit to include songs and sermons as well. But after last season's interview, we realized that an interview was far more important than it seemed in the moment, because we get to shed some light on gospel-centered, solid, faithful men of God in a way that publicizes their work and efforts, and so we wanted to do that again. Yeah. So if you would, just take us back to the beginning. Where are you from?
So, Charlotte is the town, Charlotte, Texas, and it's about an hour south of San Antonio. Hour and a half as a crow flies from the border, and so it's a little town, kind of like Dawson. And I raised in a farming family, and so that was my background, and yeah. So, yeah.
All right. From there.
Yeah. So being from there, from Charlotte, farming town. So you mentioned earlier just over dinner that was part of your life, I assume, was farming. So what was it like growing up in Charlotte?
And I enjoyed part of it. And looking back, I'm far more grateful than I was, because there's aspects I enjoyed of it, being out in the country. I had and they seem to be more blessings than it used to be, of like things like just hunting or just going out and enjoying the scenery and everything like that. Mm-hmm. But I hated the work. Like I hated going out in the heat. I told myself, this is the stupidest thing. When I grow old, I'm older and I'm out of the house, I'm not going to have a job where I'm in the AC. Or excuse me, I'm not going to have a job where I'm not in the AC. Like, that's just crazy to deal with this humid Texas heat. So, and which is funny because I had multiple jobs where I was out in the heat. Like,
never say never.
Yeah, exactly. But I enjoyed it. Dad was a godly man, wonderful example. I was raised in a Christian home with my mother and father. I had 2 older sisters. And I was raised up in probably a typical SBC church. And there were, while I was there, or when I remembered, there was a few pastors there, but one that would come later that'd be more substantial in growing me and my faith. But I was blessed in that regard, in having a godly home and good examples.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when in life did you become a believer? Like, when did God save you?
I almost say I don't know.
Sure.
And that's part of the fortunate testimony is I was baptized around the age of 8, and whether I was saved then or, as y'all probably know, typical in evangelicalism, do you believe you're going to go to heaven, and you're kind of led into Baptist, to be baptized, and is there truly faith? But I believed in the idea of Christ and what he died for, and I did believe I was sinful, and so very, very well I could have been saved at that point. And I see snippets, and I say it that way because I see snippets later in life where I was living in some sort of sinful way, like in high school, and overly convicted. And certainly there is a conviction that there's a worldly repentance that leads to death, as Paul says in 1 Corinthians. But I believe I was truly convicted over not just like either I got caught or this makes me feel bad, but I sinned against a loving God. And so I think there was salvation there, and I was saved, and the Spirit was convicting. So saved around that time. It wasn't until like later in college where I felt like I was truly living a discipled life, if you will, and actually convictionally walking in step with the Spirit.
All right. So you don't don't really have a time that you feel like you weren't saved.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, but you mentioned in college, that's when you started to feel more, or walk that more out.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
you entered the Fire Academy in 2010.
Yeah.
How'd that go?
So, boy, and I know many have. I was a guy who was constantly searching of what I wanted to do with life, and I was unhappy. You know, I think it was around a junior year in college, a little before. My dad was diagnosed with cancer. He was, if I remember correctly, he was before, but it came back with a vengeance, and left college. And it was during that time actually that I was trying to figure out, okay, what do I want to do? Because I don't think there's anything in college I really want to do. And my wife was, well, at that time, girlfriend, fiance, she finished her bachelor. She was going to master's. And I was filling with pride. I was feeling like insufficient. Like, oh, I'm a dummy. I'm an idiot. And I'm marrying a woman with a master's degree. But I did have a desire for firefighting. I was a volunteer firefighter, even in high school, which was really fun. I got out, like I had a pager and it would go off and we were allowed this to happen. Me and another guy, like would be in the middle of Spanish class and our pagers go off, beep, 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 and we had the capability to just like run out and go fight fires. It was really awesome.
So that's where the desire to be I came.
Yeah,
So
it
you
did.
could just leave class. Yeah.
Exactly. Man, what an excuse. So I desired that. I went back working on the farm, kind of helping my uncle, while my dad was dealing with cancer. And during that time, I was preparing for the Fire Academy. I did part of it at home as far as some like the book stuff, and then went to the academy. Loved it all. At that time, also I had my EMT training, and so I did rotations there in a hospital and on back of the van. That ended when I realized two things. One less is a bit more minor. I hated heights. Like I could not do it. A fear. So we had to propel from a 3-story building. All these guys were doing like little tricks and all that, going down, propelling, and I was horrified. Did it, horrified. I knew this is going to be a problem, depending on where I am in Texas. Second thing was far more substantial. Riding back to the ambulance. I have an incredibly bad inner ear problem where I get motion sickness like crazy. Like a swing set will set it off. Yeah, it's gotten worse with age. It wasn't as bad then, but it was bad enough where writing reports with a patient right there, I felt awful. Just awful. So I knew this can't, unless I live on Dramamine for the rest of my life, I can't make a career out of this. Right. So that door was closing. So that's kind of what ended my firefighting EMT desires. Yeah.
You didn't want to get sick on the patient.
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
Exactly.
Did that happen?
No. And I even on the roller coasters, anything, I don't feel like vomiting. It's just like, I don't know, just a horrid headache and nauseous stomach, but just never vomiting. Yeah.
Nice.
Wow. Well, you mentioned a little bit Kayla, your wife.
Yes,
so how did you guys meet? How did that all come about? And when did y'all get married?
So I went to Texas State University in San Marcos, and I joined a Christian fraternity. Needed a date for Pledge Week at the end, and I forgot what they call the last day, but there was just a kind of a banquet, dancing, things like that. And I knew her roommate she was in a town next to us, and I got to know her through like church stuff. And I really was liking her quite a bit. Asked her if she would go. She didn't. She already had a date, which was a bummer at the time. But then she said, "But I have my roommate, and she would be willing to go with you." And so I did my MySpace lookup, and when we had MySpace, and I was like, "Wow, this is gonna work perfectly." She's older, she's good looking. That checks all the boxes, and so picked her up. And long story short, we continued dating, and we were married in 2010. Yeah, right. So 2 years, a little under, maybe 2 years later. It was about 2 years later. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Nice. How long were we all engaged for?
We were engaged for about a year.
Okay.
Yeah, about a year. Yeah, somewhere around there.
Gotcha. Okay, so you've got, you don't really know when you were saved, and then you're kind of in an identity crisis. Like, what am I going to do with my life?
Oh, yeah.
When did all of that start to translate to, I might be called to ministry? Like, how did that come about?
And I never would have expected that. So, first off, never did I have a desire, first for ministry, like that just wasn't an idea. And secondly, for public speaking. I mean, even in communications class in college, I remember we had an assignment where we had to create some type of phone, and this is just when iPhones were kind of being something special. So maybe the first two were out or something like that, and we were creating our own, and we had to describe it to the class. And I was one who would like quiver, like you're about to cry when you're speaking, and that's how my voice was the whole time. And so I hated public speaking. So never in a million years would I thought I would have gone into ministry. So I was in farming with my father when he passed. Not long before he passed away, I had a great offer in the oil field. So just a little bit of background. Some have heard of the Eagle Ford Shale, which was a big deal back in South Texas. It's not so much now. When that little after that started booming, I had an offer to get into the oil field, and it was a good job. It wasn't like hard working on the rigs, but it was out in the heat. So, but good paying, and I didn't want to work with my dad and uncle anymore on the family farm. So did that. Was there for 5 years, and during that time I thought this was it. I found my identity, or I found what I want to do with life. Sure. And I got a promotion. I started working as a SCADA tech, supervisory control and data acquisition. Fancy way of saying I installed like off grid valves and meters on solar power. So it did in South Texas, Mississippi, Louisiana, things like that.
Still in the heat.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and especially Louisiana, Mississippi, the humid. So moving up, but in making really good money, as most do in the oil field. But I realized during this time, spiritually, I was not leading our home in any way. I was working a 6-on-3 off schedule. So when I was off, I might go to church. If I didn't go with my 50 excuses not to go to church, my wife was going to church even after our first child was born, even maybe after our second child was born. And it dawned on me at one point, like I'm not leading my home. I was chasing finances, or what wealth could bring, and so I started being very convicted about that. And during that time, I had to pull into farming again, but not conventional farming. We think of row crops out in the fields when you drive by. I was thinking more with livestock, and a bit more, I don't want to say organic, but the word that became popular was regenerative farming. So working with animals. And I started looking more and more into that slowly, and so I was on the job, and I still feel guilty about this, but I would use some of my time just like to dive into that. And are we going to move it out of state for this? And there's possibilities. Anyway, so long story short, those two things, those pulls, those convictions were coming together. Like I love farming. I love that lifestyle. That would be better for my family. And also, I'm not leaving my home. I just need to leave. I need to get out. It was that time where it was a mixture of the Eagle Ford Shale. The oil prices are going down, and I probably, I still feel convicted about it. I probably wasn't the best employee. They're like, "Hey, Wilson, you're the bottom of the pole. We got to let you go." And wonderful bosses, but I'm grateful they made that decision.
Yeah.
And so I was out. Went back to working on the farm. During that time, since I was off on Sundays, I was back in church. And a hometown church, so we moved back. And that pastor I mentioned earlier that I said was very influential in molding me, he was still pastoring there. He came in when I was about to leave for high school. I just had a desire to serve at that time. So a bit of a revitalization in my own heart. Hey, chairs need to be put up. I'll do it. We're going to go around the community and door to door with some evangelism. I'm there. I'm for that. Just whatever you need. I would go when I had a time off to sit in his office just to chat, and I was getting a bit more interested in theology. Around that time, I heard of R.C. Sproul, and I was like, oh, the R.C. Sproul. I wanted something deeper. So I'm R.C. Sproul. I'm like, wow, this is really deep. I don't even understand everything he's talking about.
Too deep.
Yeah, too big. And I actually think I did say that. And I pulled back a bit, and I think I read a little bit of, or started listening to a little bit of John Piper. And then that word Calvinism came up. And I'm like, what in the world is this? I don't know what that means. It's about Calvary, Mount Calvary. Like, I don't know. And I remembered at that time, oh, this girl back in college told me to watch out for that church because it's a Calvinistic church. And I was like, again, about Calvary? Like Mount Calvary? I didn't understand. I didn't even ask questions. So anyway, I just dove into that. And when I began to understand a bit more of Reformed theology and coming to this understanding, I was like, whoa, this is amazing. Where is this? And so I diving in, meeting with my pastor, and I'm not really talking to him about it because I didn't know how he would feel about it, but still interested nonetheless in theology. And he's like, you need to be teaching a Sunday school class. All right, yeah, I'd be happy to teach. That sounds great. And so I started leading a Sunday school class, and that went on for quite a while. And this time I broke away from the family farm. I'm farming my own with the kind of regenerative farming. I started with broilers or pastured chickens. For fun, I did like batches of 40 in a chicken tractor. So you move it around, and it would do that for 8 weeks. I'd get them processed. That exploded. That became its own business. And I went from like 40 every 8 weeks to 500 a month.
Wow.
Yeah. And I capped out at that. So that became like, I'm going all in on this, and I did. And we were going to expand a lot more. I bought our own farm, 30 acres, a house, and all that. I was doing that. And so while I was doing that, I was able to make my own time with that and still be very involved with the church. And eventually, there was an opportunity to be like an associate youth pastor at a church nearby. And I talked to my pastor about it. He's like, I think that's a great opportunity. I took it. And so I was serving at this church nearby. It was about 30 minutes away from our house. Farm still going on. Wonderful pastor there. While I was there, I became a bit more convicted of Reformed theology, and specifically early Baptist confessionalism, and became aware of the 1689 or Second London Confession. And I knew that it's going to be a bit difficult serving in this church because it was a typical SBC church as well. So this is 2008, I believe, when Hurricane Harvey hit. So I did a lot of my sales in the farming, in the farm business, in the Corpus Christi Rockport area, which is on the coast. Harvey just went right over Rockport, and I was selling to a co-op there, a large substantial amount, and then to a farmer's market, and even a 5-star, 4-star restaurant at a hotel in Corpus. So that went away, and my business was done. I mean, that I put all my eggs in one basket on the coast, and that was it. So I thought things were done. They were going to collapse. It was around that time my information was out there about on the website, or out on the web, I suppose. And so as I'm trying to collect the pieces and wondering what are we going to do with this, it was in 2009 when Dawson got a hold of my information, and I got in contact with them, and so we started talking about the idea of serving at the church. And long story short, we decided it would be a difficult move, like leaving the farm life, which that's all I knew, but we were confident the Lord was leading that direction. So we came to Dawson. Yeah. So that was in September 2009.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
2009?
2009. So 2008 Harvey hit, and during that time I was collecting pieces, trying to repivot, and having some success with that, selling in other places. So it wasn't all collapse. I was able to get some things done. And my wife was working at this time. She was a speech pathologist working in the schools, and so we weren't in total disarray at the moment. Sure. So I had a desire to keep going with a farm, but I knew my wife was carrying a heavy burden. I needed to be a bit more supportive. So we were just waiting patiently for what the Lord would have of us, and that's when the opportunity arose. Yeah, so it was about 6 to 8 months of that time period of kind of waiting, and then Dawson and I got in contact with one another.
Nice.
So Dawson, which is where you are now, obviously senior pastor, is that title?
Correct. Yeah.
Is that when they reached out to you? Was it? Did you go straight to that position, or did y'all come to Dawson first and then somehow get into?
No, came for this position. I mean, we came to visit first, of course.
Sure.
But as far as when we moved here, it was for being a pastor. Yeah. So we had several interviews and discussions and questions and answers and meeting with the congregation, of course, and all those things that usually are involved. Again, after praying for it some time, we sold the farm and moved this way. Yeah.
I had a question of how long have you been alive? I feel like you've had so many careers. Like,
I know.
I was spent 6 years here and 6 years.
I've had others
incredible.
comment about that. Yeah. And I didn't even mention some other, like I worked in a dealership before. I worked on a ranch. So 33. Yeah. It's just I really was trying to find out what am I going to do. Yeah.
Well, at least you didn't waste any time.
I didn't.
Like you were.
I collected a lot of skills, and I'm a master of none of them. So that's
Yep. That's awesome.
That's cool, man.
Okay, so you ended up in this role here in Dawson. How have things gone? Was it an easy transition? Was it?
Yes, in the beginning it was actually, and I guess maybe this is the honeymoon period, as they call it sometimes, when the pastor comes in. He's the new guy in town, especially small towns. So when I got here, maybe there's between 60, 80 folks in the church, and probably a good handful were visitors. A good handful were of the congregation was mostly elderly, as you often find in a small town. Mm-hmm. And so the first 6 months or so, fairly smooth. No issues of anything too substantial. Then, as we were talking about over dinner, COVID hit, and that did start changing things. I didn't have the problems like others have when it comes to with a mask or vaccines or issues over safe distance and all that stuff. We did practice some of those things, but it was never anything that brought heat into the church and conflict. So the beginning part was pre-COVID was fairly calm. Yeah, fairly calm.
Yeah. Nice. Okay.
So all of that in mind, you're a pastor, and I think so. Everyone at this table, at least, is involved in ministry. We know that there can be misconceptions. Like, what do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions of your role as a pastor and what you do in ministry?
Yeah,
whether good or bad, just they're there.
Right. Yeah, certainly. And I suppose depending on a person's background and not only denomination, so whether Baptist, but even what type of Baptist or what have you, it can change that.
Yeah.
I think there's a tendency, and I see this. I see this with a lot of Baptists in Texas or maybe in the South. So this is anecdotal. I'll really stress that, but the pastor needs to be mostly concerned with the social activities, with visitings and organizing events and things like that. And so, which growing up, I can think, okay, yeah, I probably thought of the pastor more like that. He does have a sermon on Sundays. Maybe he has a little message on Wednesdays or what have you. But hey, most of the time he needs to be seeing folks, and he needs to be planning these events because there's always so many events. So I think that is often an idea that pastor is like this organizer. He needs to be out and about often with the public or meeting with members, which is really good, certainly. Sure. And that needs to be the main focus of his time. Right. Where I came in stressing, there's some very important things in everything I just said that we need to take care of, no doubt. But primarily, I needed to handle the word well and make sure it's prepared well, because I've seen plenty of pastors who they went to seminary, and I was like, whoa, it's quite watered down. It's quite shallow. And is it because of their knowledge, or is it because they didn't spend a lot of time, or both? And so I think that was one of the biggest misconceptions. Probably still is, and less in my church now, probably, but for many others is, oh, the pastor's that guy. He's really nice, and you know he's always there to talk with, and he needs to be out and about doing those things.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yep.
All right. So, anything else? You know, like if you think about, you're trying to just relay what your testimony is. Anything else that you wanted to bring up? Any influential people or anything like that?
Yeah. So not so much when I was younger. When outside of the pastor who really helped just lay level, and I don't mean that in a demeaning way, but his character was substantial, and how I still to this day think, how does, his name's Dwayne, how would Dwayne handle this? Because he's still one of the most godliest men I know, on how he handled himself, whether it's conflicts, or how he was able to carry on a conversation with those who are difficult to carry on a conversation with, or to relate with, and he just had a way to relate. And so always he played an influential part in that, and which by the way, I even more I think that's substantial in the church needed to raise pastors, not seminaries. As someone who's still going through seminary, I'm just more convinced than ever that what seminary has become, by and large, isn't always so helpful. If getting to the pastoral ministry. Now, if someone is wanting to be get their PhD or doctoral work, I get it. That makes total sense. But so anyhow, but outside of that, those figures who really helped develop me were probably most essential, Mark Dever, with 9 Marks and Capitol Hill Baptist Church, and what a healthy church is, which I really dove into. When it comes to confessional theology, 2 figures, Richard Barcelos and Sam Renahan, who are both in California, and they teach at IRBS and a little bit at Covenant Baptist. But those 3 gentlemen were substantial in developing more of my theological and ecclesiology and what I was desiring for the church and as well. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Nice.
Okay.
Good.
So we'll shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
Into just more random questions.
Got it.
So this one isn't even a question, but looking into the camera, using only facial expressions, tell us what you think of these Johns. Okay? Because
all right.
I've got a couple of them.
Okay.
John Hagee. John MacArthur. John Wesley. John Krasinski. John Calvin.
Oh.
John Goodman. John Piper. John Frame. John the Baptist. And Jonathan Edwards. Well done.
Nice.
Mostly good there. Mostly good.
With John Krasinski, I almost went.
That would have been perfect.
I should have thought
If
of
we had a little
it.
side camera to look over.
Okay. How are you feeling with Aaron Rodgers potentially being traded to the Jets? Like that whole situation, because you're a Packers fan.
Oh, yes. So I'm not a great Packers fan anymore. Okay. So I became really good. I used to be in fantasy football. I used to follow sports radio and like Dan Patrick Show. I don't know, familiar. Diehard Dan Patrick Show listener and other shows. I mean, I was getting to know backup players in the NFL. Like it was ridiculous. And so I was watching I had to NFL Sunday Ticket on DirecTV. Like I had to watch Green Bay games. All right. So fast forwarding, when I got here, I realized like I need to back up on this. Like it was just taking up too much time. And so to answer that question, I I don't care as much anymore. And not only because I'm not a Green Bay fan, I'm not a big fan of Aaron Rodgers anymore. Not only because of how his interaction with Green Bay, but him as a person. I just, and I know they probably should be disconnected, because if it's an amazing quarterback or any type of player, if they're good, they're good. Who cares a little bit what his personal life is? But it's hard for me to dissect that, because I don't respect him as much as a person as I used to, to be honest. Yeah.
Do you feel like, obviously nobody at this table knows him personally, but like, do you feel like someone who was a Packers fan and probably followed him, that he didn't always used to be that way? Like, I
don't think he was.
I feel like he used to be just super chill.
Absolutely.
And then it was like,
and I don't know what happened.
Going, man?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's some of those who he dated, ladies he dated, or what. I don't know. He started. He did change. I'm confident he changed from the outside looking in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's make sure it wasn't just me.
No, he changed.
Yeah.
Well, secondary question before we get out of Green Bay. South Texas, an hour from the border. Green Bay?
Yeah, we get that so much.
Yeah.
So, two things. One, I got so sick and tired of hearing Cowboys. Like, I'm so tired of it.
Who talks about the Cowboys?
Yeah, I know, right? Like, just, oh, gosh. So, I think it was probably a bit of, like, I want to be different. I'd have to acknowledge that. Secondly, I had a friend who had a Brett Favre poster up in his room, and I was part of it. And then I was raised on a farm. We had John Deere tractors, which is green and yellow, and so there was I think it was just all of that mixed together.
Yeah.
And like my grandpa, who just tried to get me to watch football, he's like, "Hey, I got Green Bay on. They're playing the Cowboys, and it's Brett Favre." And I was like, "I want to watch this." So I think that had a lot to do with it. Yeah.
Have you ever been to a game at
Lambeau? I've been to Lambeau Field.
Yeah.
I have not watched it. I didn't watch a game.
Okay.
The year they won the Super Bowl, that year I had tickets to the Chicago and Green Bay game, and I think they were both in NFC conference for a championship, if I remember correctly, or it was going to be. All right, so it wasn't the NFC championship game; it was one of the last games of the season, but it was substantially important. I got tickets to it, and something happened. I couldn't go.
Ooh.
But or I got to share this. So this is why I couldn't go. I asked my wife if she could get our hotel rooms booked. I was like, yeah, she got them. So she booked our hotel rooms. About 2 weeks out, I was like, I want to call, just confirm our hotel rooms. My wife confirmed it on the wrong week. And there was no way to change it. Like, they're booked up.
Yeah.
It's too popular. Yeah. So that was it. Like, we there was nowhere to stay. Man. So we didn't go. Yeah.
Golly.
I don't bring that up much but I had to get back on why we're going to go.
Well, I've just heard, I have some friends who are, he's a Cowboy fan, but also a Packers fan. And he's gone a couple times, and he's like, he goes, before the game, you go out to eat. During the game, they're just the nicest people in the world up there. And so it's easy to be a fan of the Packers, it seems like. So,
they say it's the one, and I'm sure that maybe some other teams would say this, our fans, but they say it's the one NFL team that feels like a college team as far as the fans,
right.
And so anyway, but yeah. and I don't like Jerry Jones either as a manager. He needs to get out of the way. But yeah.
Amen.
We are familiar with suffering.
Yeah, I bet so.
Well, okay, so the kind of jumping off of that, I was at the Super Bowl when Aaron Rodgers won. It was Green Bay and Steelers, right? Yeah. I was actually at
You
that
were
game.
there?
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's awesome. That's awesome.
But now that you're not a Packers fan as much anymore, it doesn't really mean as much. Okay. So it's recently been talked about more openly that modern agricultural practices, such as taking an entire field to grow one crop, like wheat, corn, that is terrible for the soil because of just everything that it does.
Right.
Nothing grows that way naturally. So do you think that there will be a shift toward more regenerative farming and those techniques, or do you think the dollar still kind of dictates the day in your...
I think the dollar still dictates, and I think that will continue. It's hard for, as they say, an old dog to learn new tricks. Like, it's just so difficult to explain to someone who's been in farming forever, like, what about this? No, and for them it just works. You put in the inputs of various biocides and herbicide, pesticide, fungicides. You you spray, you use these fertilizers that are made by from petrol. I mean, this has been going on for so long that's like, why would you change this? This works, even though slowly there seems to be effect, and then the economy affects it, and ability to get to get chemicals that are made from either phosphate or from fuel or what have you. And so I don't think things will change, unfortunately. I think what we're seeing is smaller. I think what we're seeing is individuals thinking, I'd like to be a bit more self-sufficient, and even if they only have an acre or two, some chickens in a garden. And I think that will be the biggest change we do see, which we already have seen.
Yeah.
So I don't think there will be a substantial change in the agricultural world, especially since there's less small farms that we think of and idolize that I came back out of. The average age of the American farmer is like 75 or something like that. So many of the farms, especially in the South or in the Midwest, they're less little farms that we like to think of, and it's more conglomerates that are owned by big companies and even Chinese companies. So I don't think we're going to see a big substantial change there.
We have chickens. And
awesome!
Love it.
Yeah.
I will never go back. Like I think I'll always have chickens.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. In Acts 15, verse 36 through 41, we read about a disagreement between Paul and Barnabas. Barnabas wanted to take John Mark along, but Paul disagreed because John Mark had previously deserted them. Who to you do you think was more right?
Oh, man. Probably to my nature, I would just say I don't know. As a guy who, like, you know what, that's not my business. But I'll just side against Paul a little bit because I love Paul, but he does seem like a guy who would have been maybe hard to get along with at times because he's going to be very zealous. Mm-hmm. So that would probably influence my decision against Paul. I would have to say, but yeah.
I like it.
What's your answer?
Makes sense. The same.
Oh.
Yeah. Now, good answer.
I've always thought that was interesting because I took more of a redeem the story, like bring him back, and he didn't desert you this time or something like that. But but the narrative follows Paul from that point on.
Yeah.
It doesn't follow Barnabas. So.
That's right.
Okay, you have a mission. Travel back in time to colonial era America and convince them that you're actually from the future. What do you do? And while you're thinking, we can credit Nate Bargatze. That's where we got the question. But.
Gotcha.
Colonial.
Did I bring anything with me?
No,
Ooh,
just you.
Question.
Okay, so it's just me.
Clothes are you wearing?
I would, and I only say this because I just read a book called 1776. So colonial America. Now I'm really narrowing down a bit about the life of Washington. I would get with Washington and the colonial leaders and say, all right, look, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen with the Americans or with the War of Independence. In Washington, I'm going to tell you some of the things you wrote in your diary.
Oh, there you go.
All right. Now you so there's going to be your proof.
Right.
Yeah. So that's where I would go with it.
I like it.
So if you could bring something to that time, like what would you have brought?
You know what? I'm not even saying this is the best thing, but it's what came to mind, and I just thought an AR-15. I don't. There's probably some way better things to bring, but
can you imagine the look on their faces?
Oh, yes.
As they're stuffing their mustache.
Yeah.
And you're just tut.
Yes, that would be like that'd be. I hate to say fun because that's war, but it would be fun.
Yeah.
Like there's
But after the first clip, then you're like, well,
yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
I can no longer prove anything.
Yep.
Oh man. Okay. Book or books that have shaped you the most?
Oh man, yeah. So of course, outside of scripture, So, going back to Mark Dever, I would have to say 9 Marks of a Healthy Church, and I could almost just add in their collection of Healthy Church series, like just substantial in my foundation of the church, the local church, which I just did not have a good concept of growing up. It wasn't well taught, and no offense to my other pastors, and they may have, and I was a teenager and I just didn't care, and that could have been it, but that was substantial. So there's that. I'd have to say Lord of the Rings, and furthering my desire of like my imagination that continues on, and I think it helps in even sermon preparation and illustrations and things like that. So there's that part. Citizen Soldier by Stephen F. Ambrose, which is about World War II, and I dug into that, but it gave me appreciation and dove me deeper into history, and that was in high school when I read that and I dove in. But again, going back to knowing man's past, just historical secular history was helpful in identifying how we've come to the place we are now, both as a people, but also, and I mentioned this earlier, with individuals of when, even if I know they're wrong, and I'm pastoring them, and I want to either get offended, or quickly make a decision on them. It helps me stop to think, what built them to be who they are. Like, why are they what they are? And that doesn't take away the guilt of sin of ourselves, but it does help in relating to, okay, you're this way because how you're raised, or so that was helpful. And then the last one I think that was substantial and I still go to is Francis Turretin's Eclectic, which I probably butchered that, and I do every time. But his Institutes, substantial. I still go to one of my favorite systematics. It's not the easiest one, but it's one it was the first one I bought, and I think most go with what's his name? It's not coming to mind. He's a Baptist theologian. Anyway, but I can't think of it right now. But Turretin was substantial. Yeah. Nice. So yeah.
You mentioned Lord of the Rings kind of opening up your imagination.
Yes.
How do you translate that as a father? Like, how do you help to foster that in your own children, that sense of imagination?
Part of it obviously is introducing them to Tolkien's Middle Earth mythology, but beyond that, and my wife's good at this as well, is storytelling or creating stories, and they've dove into that. They do that on their own, or they like to tell stories or write them down, some of them more than others, or even if it's in drawing format. But it helps foster not only further imagination, but also reading, which is something I've wanted to walk well in not forcing it, but oh man, just you should read. It's so awesome. And it's so enriching, and so that has been an avenue to foster it.
Yeah, nice. Have you always been a reader yourself?
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
When I was in middle school, it really started. We had this like reading program where like you can earn points and get prizes, and that probably led it on. But I continued on, and even then I was reading some like fantasy and history stuff. But I remember when I was working on the farm and we were planting peanuts, so mostly a peanut farmer. The family, we did cotton, but my dad was a smart man. He was not definitely against reading in any way. He was right in doing this, so I was really into like World War II history, and so you fill the planter at the end of the row. Think of a big field where there's crops. We're planting with peanuts, and you have these hoppers that have peanut seed in them. You got to fill them up, and then the tractor takes the planter and plants the peanuts. So I was a guy at that time who was filling those planters with 50-pound bags of peanut seed. So I'd have to have a book. While my dad's on a field, he's coming back. He would go through a few rounds, and I'd have to fill up. And so I'd be reading books. And one time I didn't catch that he was back, and I was in a book. And he's like, "Well, you got to put a book down. You got to stop reading." And so I don't even know where that question went, but I just remember that I acted like, oh, you hate knowledge. And it really wasn't that. I was just being a sorry worker. That's really what it was. Yeah.
So to risk sounding and looking real stupid, what is a peanut seed? Is that or
Yeah.
is that what you call it?
Yeah. You know what it is?
I don't know why I just assumed you just put a peanut in the ground.
And that's it.
Is it okay?
That's
all
it.
right, I just
No,
making sure.
that's what it is. It grows kind of underground, on a vine, kind of like you would think of potatoes or something like that. It just grows underground on these vines, and when it's time to harvest, you have this machine that flips them over, like kind of digs them out and flips it. We call them digger, and then we have a combine which pulls them in and strips the plant from the peanuts and puts them in a hopper, big basket. Yeah,
Super cool. Nice.
That's a good question.
Yeah, it was.
I'm glad you asked that.
Well, I was like, is there a peanut seed inside the peanut?
No, that's a good
I'm
question.
really confused.
I've had people ask me, is
makes sense.
peanuts grow on trees? I'm like, no. They're not even a nut, so
They're not?
no, they're a legume. They're a bean. They're in the bean family. They're
What is
a legume.
happening right now?
Yeah, they're not technically. They're not a nut.
Really?
Why they got looped with peanuts, or I mean, why they got looped with nuts? I really don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're
makes
not
sense, though.
they're not
Yeah.
a nut.
Huh.
They're a bean.
Interesting.
Yeah,
That's blowing my mind.
yeah. There you go.
Wow.
Man. Okay. As far as preaching,
Okay.
manuscript, notes, outline, or no notes. What do you do? But then also, what would you disciple a young pastor toward?
A manuscript. I manuscript now. With time, I've been able to shorten my manuscript in areas where I know I can elaborate myself, go off script, I guess you would say. That, and as time has gone on, I'm more comfortable doing that. But I definitely still manuscript. I cannot imagine, and I know there's some wonderful pastors out there to do it. Cannot imagine going without no notes on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Now I've done without script. I do without script on Sunday evening. A bit of notes. We're going through the 1677 Baptist Catechism or the Keach's Catechism, and I'll go no notes with that or minimum notes. Wednesday nights minimum notes. But yeah, I definitely do manuscript. It helps just guide me, make sure I'm hitting the points I need, and make sure I'm not butchering something important.
Yeah.
A new guy, I would absolutely encourage manuscript. And if he, within a year or two, what have you, is like, hey, I do great with just an outline, awesome, wonderful. But for their sake and make sure they handle the word well, I would say manuscript. Even if you manuscript and then you pull from that manuscript a bit of outlining to take in the pulpit, but even then, I would probably encourage still manuscript.
Yeah.
And encourage the church. Especially if it was my church, I would explain to the church, understand if it looks like he's not doing this well, if he's reading from the script, he's learning. Let's be patient with him.
Yeah.
All right. It's more important that he handles the word well than he's this charismatic, awesome speaker.
Yeah.
Good
point.
point. Sometimes it's like a great fallback to like nerves settle in. And you're just like, okay, this is here. I know this is what I need to focus on.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
absolutely. Okay. Something the evangelical world adores that you cannot stand, or someone.
This is probably too broad, but I would just say pragmatism, which is more of a methodology. But let me get more specific. Programs, like we gotta have programs. Like, what about an evangelism program? We need a program to have these just events or special. Classes or I don't know. Just everything is in a program mode where it's not organic. It's not just, first off, number one, the joy of gathering for the ordinary means of grace on a Sunday morning, and that being what feeds us primarily. Or you know what? I'm gonna try to share the gospel with that guy at work. No, I got to have a program to do. Like, we got to have a program. And so program, I think it's one of the worst. And they have their place. Our church has, I guess we'd say, programs. But that is the side dish to the main meal of what the church is. I guess I'll explain it that way.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
You need a committee for the programs.
You need a committee for the programs, yeah.
Yeah. Anything else? The floor is yours, man.
Yeah. On this question,
Yeah. Pet peeves? Any of those?
individual. It goes over probably programs maybe a bit. They kind of get interwoven, but individualism has run rampant in the church. We can talk about it in the broader church. Carl Trueman wrote a book that was substantial called The Rise and Fall of the Modern Self. And he talked, basically the idea is, how did we get to the point in our society where a man can call himself a woman? Like, how did we get here with that idea? But one thing I pulled from that book and that journey through history and the philosophies that brought us here is the church has taken that hook, line, and sinker as well. And no, we may not affirm some of those things, but it is about ultimately how do I feel about this church? Not so much is it speaking the truth.
Right.
That is secondary. And I've had conversations with folks who've moved into town. They're like, hey, I'm looking for a church. Tell me about your church. What's so awesome about your church? And what do you offer? And at points I go, you know what? We do what we've been doing for 2,000 years. We preach a word well. We have some people who are very loving. And we've had folks come in, some newer believers out of state that have joined our church. Like, I tried some other churches around the area, and I tried you, and I loved, like, I could not go to a church like this anymore because of that. Yeah. So, there's maybe not many of those who would say that because our church, our culture is just so used to it. And I need to find that church that gives me what I want and makes me have those good feelings inside. And that's, Lord willing, we see slowly that kind of flow away. I don't know if it will, but that's a big one.
Yeah. We don't offer much, but what we do offer is everything you need.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Favorite Tom Hanks movie?
Saving Private Ryan.
I was about to say,
World
War
Saving
II.
Private Ryan. It's I love it. It's easily.
Yeah. That one's acceptable. I mean, he's got a bunch of great movies.
He does.
Also, Toy Story, is up there.
Absolutely. That first one, that was big for me.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. That was a good one. That's a good choice.
I'm curious as to your answer on that one.
Tom Hanks specifically, probably Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah.
Tom Hanks and Forrest Gump are probably in my top 3 movies.
Wait, Tom Hanks and
I mean, what did I just say?
Tom Hanks,
Saving Private Ryan and Forrest Gump are probably in my top 3-4 movies.
Well, and then as a producer, Band of Brothers.
Yeah. See, I was about to bring that up. And then Pacific he did as well.
Yeah.
But Band of Brothers, just incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like my wife does not care much about that type of history, and just recently, like a few weeks ago, we finished Band of Brothers, and she loved it. Like,
it's phenomenal. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
Polar Express too. I mean, just Tom Hanks. Come on.
Well, he played everybody in the movie.
I guess that was pretty good talent.
Okay. What was Augustine's first name?
What was Augustine?
I
just read a huge.
Augustine.
Oh, is it
Augustine?
I would say Augustine. Yeah.
Well, actually, his first name's Aurelius, but Saint would also work.
Really?
Yeah,
It's
Aurelius Augustine.
Dang, I feel bad about knowing. I just read like this huge chunk of biography about him, but I missed that. Interesting.
It's not very well known.
I had no clue
Really?
whatsoever.
Yeah. Aurelius.
Wow.
Okay. One of the, if you can share it with us, or if you can just pick from a few in your Rolodex, what's one of the cringiest moments of your pastoral career so far?
Oh yeah. I'm sure there's more cringier, but I was.
Should we ask Kayla?
She'll know this one.
Yeah.
So we have book studies on Monday. One thing I started it's been really helpful, incredibly helpful. Book studies on Monday nights where it's like, church, like, we're going to be reading this book together, be part of it. And that's brought substantial growth. But one book we were about to start reading, I was during our time of announcements on Sunday morning, I was telling the church about it. It's like really good. And I was trying to sell them on being part of this study. So I said, it's so good. I allowed my wife to read it. And I don't know why I said it that way. And they caught each other and they're like, what? And I was like, I'm sorry, I don't mean I allowed my wife. She can read when she wants to. And yeah, they really enjoyed that. They got a kick out of that one. I'm sure I've had cringier, but that's the only one that they still give me a hard time. So
That's funny.
Yeah.
What a generous husband.
Don't allow my wife to read. Yeah. Filling the media stereotype of the Christian pastor who's, doesn't allow his life any freedoms. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. What can you tell us about Beta Epsilon Chi? What are some good things that you had coming out of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I told y'all this earlier. So Beta Epsilon Chi was the Christian fraternity I was part of, Texas State, and I think they've been around since '95. So not like this real long history, but first off, it was an authentic Christian fraternity. I just was confident it was going to be a Christian fraternity, and no, it wasn't. It was substantial. I'm so grateful for it. I partied a bit in high school, and I knew without it, I would easily enter kind of a partying world in high school. In college, and especially in Texas State. It was at one point it was like rated number 1 party school in the nation. I think you
all
can
my
find
buddies
it.
who went there. That's the story.
Yeah. And honestly, I think you could go to any campus, you probably wouldn't tell the difference. But whatever. But having a group of brothers, and many of them were in a sense immature, but who isn't in college, that was substantial in dealing with things together. But they also had a supervisor who was over us, who was a doctor. He was a professor at the camp on campus who was excellent. So Beta Epsilon Chi was great in bringing together brothers from various denominations, and giving us camaraderie that men need. That's often not found, frankly, unfortunately, often not found always in the church, which I love to foster. And so it's understandable when it's found outside of the church. We're looking for something like that, and fraternities fill that need, and having such a fraternity like that was really helpful, and I think it's still beneficial. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Do they have those at other universities as well? Or?
They do. A&M, maybe UT. I think there's a few other Texas ones, and then there's some in other colleges more in the Southeast, I think.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. You're chosen as the speaker coordinator for a conference on preaching. Your 3 main speakers are who? But there's a bonus. You can choose one dead theologian to use as a hologram.
Oh, okay. So I easily know my hologram one, my dead one. Let me put that off to the side. I would want to go with pastors that are less well known, partially. Let me go easy. I want to do one that's well known, one that's not, which would be more of my focus, because there's some amazing pastors out there that are not well known. Well known, it'd be so easy to just go with. I'm not going to go with Dever. I'm going to go with Sinclair Ferguson,
nice.
Who's kind of this. He's still well known, but not one of the best picks. But he's an incredible preacher. Mm-hmm. So Sinclair Ferguson. I would probably go with like Sam Ranahan. So it's certainly not well known as compared to other guys. He's great in explaining rich topics in a way that someone can understand. He's excellent at that. What did I give there? 2?
Mm-hmm.
The 3, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The third one will be the dead guy, and easily John Chrysostom.
All right.
Yeah. He incredible, and just reading his material, incredible preacher, someone who could easily be brought into the main day or the modern day and fit.
Yeah.
He's just well spoken.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Nice.
Okay. One question that I didn't have written to talk to you about, but I wanted to address, how did Spurgeon Piper come about?
So I love Charles Spurgeon. I'm a big picture of him in my office, not this office, my church office. I really, he was one I got into not long after getting into Reformed theology, because I was encouraged to go back to the dead guys. And being a Baptist guy, he was one I picked up, and I started reading his stuff, and greatly enjoyed. He being a guy who he could easily fit on the list of a dead guy to bring into a preaching conference. So I got more and more involved in his background and his understanding and or his history, his life, and theology. My wife got me into pipe smoking, actually. And so when 2020 came about and COVID, I was like, man, I used to watch guys on YouTube, pipe smoking channels, and it was just enjoyable to watch. I'm like, well, some of them stopped for whatever reason. I was like, well, I don't know why they stopped, and then I'll do it. Yeah. So I started, and I was like, well, Spurgeon Piper. So that's how it started. Yeah.
How did Kayla get you into it? Like,
she knew I liked Lord of the Rings. Maybe I saw it in like a period piece, like I don't know, maybe a movie we were watching. I was like, man, that'd be cool to smoke a pipe. And she's just like, all right, I'll get you a pipe. And she got me a pipe for my birthday or something like that. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Now you have 1,200. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Because this isn't all of them, I would imagine, right?
I have a few more, but I've purposely avoided, I got a couple there. I purposely have kept myself from buying more. I have a friend who has like 170.
Wow.
You know, I want to smoke them all. Like I want to smoke them all. I don't want to have any off to the side where they're just there. That one over there is decoration. It's Aragorn's pipe in Lord of the Rings. I don't smoke it much, but these I smoke, and I want to smoke them all. So yeah, these are most of my collection.
Nice.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
All right.
Nice. Yeah. All right. Well, getting close to the end here. So, lightning round.
Okay.
Questions, just bang, bang. Multiple choice, essentially. First thing that comes to your mind, first answer. There are no wrong or right answers, but some of these are right. So,
I like it.
Lightning round. Ready? Greek or Hebrew?
Greek.
Cigar or pipe?
Pipe.
Easy. John's Gospel or Mark's Gospel?
John's.
Ooh. SUV or minivan?
SUV, though we're probably going to go minivan.
Also, I think we should start calling them miniature vans. Just my thought.
But they're not, though. They're bigger.
Well, what does mini stand for?
Well, when I think of
not
a
a bunch
church
of vans.
van, which is pretty big, like we have,
that's
it's
true.
mini compared to it.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So.
That works. Miniature van it is then.
Preach Leviticus or preach Revelation?
Leviticus.
Everyone's answer, right? Yeah. Walmart or HEB?
Oh, HEB.
Yeah.
Pastor a church of 100 Wilsons or try to correct the theology of a cult from the inside out?
Oh. I mean, I don't have a high view of myself. Don't get me wrong, but I have to go with Wilson's. That just sounds complicated.
Good answer. Yeah. John Deere or Massey Ferguson?
John Deere.
Nice. You saw that coming. Mainstream Christian music or mainstream Christian movies?
Oh, man. That's awful. I gotta go with the music. Like, there's some cringe Christian movies out there.
That was the one that was right. That's
yeah.
And then, in 60 seconds or less, tell us the good news of the gospel.
The good news of the gospel is that God, who is holy and good and sovereign, made man in his image, upright, with value, to be his image bearers, to spread his glory amongst the world through Adam and Eve and his offspring. But we cut ourselves off from him through failing in disobedience, falling short of his glory. Sin entered the world, not only in ourselves, but the world itself. Creation aches with it. And so instead of him leaving us to properly be condemned, he gave a promise that he would send the seed of the woman to crush the head of the serpent. And so that came about through Christ, who fulfills all the prophecies, who was both God and man, who lived the perfect life we couldn't, who fulfilled the law, which we can't do, who fulfilled the glory of God, and he took the punishment for the sins of God's people. He died, he conquered the grave and rose, having his sacrifice accepted by God. And he ascended and reigns on the throne where the church continues to go according to his authority. And he promises that the gates of hell will not diminish it.
Amen. Yeah. Well done. Okay. Anything else? Anything you want to mention? Anything you want to bring up? Anybody you want to say hi to?
No. Man, this was a joy, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate you, man.
Yeah,
it was a good time.
It was good.
Okay. Well, for the purposes of the podcast, if you will join us next week for the season finale as we close out the way we started. Until then, this has been Wilson Marsh, Aaron Alvarado, and me, Jacob Simmons, and we are made for another world.